Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Please consider this position on the board. It's white to move on move number 33. With the white pieces we have Hungarian Grandmaster Andras Adorjan, and with the black pieces the Great Dane Larsen. While you're considering this position with white to move, let me just say that Chess Audiobooks is on leechess.com, chess.com, Instagram, and Twitter. And also, please take some time right now and hit that thumbs up button to help move these videos along the YouTube algorithm. And also, feel free to share these videos and get in those comment boxes below, and also check the links below, and also consider subscribing. But if anything, the biggest thing you can do to support the channel is hit that thumbs up button. Okay, so think about the position. If you want, pause the video, and then we're going to go into my analysis here. So this position is from the Las Palmas tournament in 1977. As you can see on the map there, Las Palmas is in Spain, and it was a 16-man tournament, and you can see Anatoly Karpov had a great result at this tournament, scoring 13.5 out of 15, with Bent Larsen coming in second place with 11 out of 15. So in 1977, Karpov is world champion. Of course, he's at his absolute peak. Now, as you can see by the other names on this list, these were definitely the heavy hitters of the day. You have Bent Larsen, Jan Timman, Walter Brown, Tal is there. Also, young British Grandmaster Anthony Miles. So you had some great chess at this tournament in the Las Palmas tournament 1977. It's definitely worth looking at to study some brilliant chess. So let's get into this position right here from White's perspective and Black's perspective, not just White's perspective. Let's look at it. But we're going to start with the general analysis. So first thing we're going to look at, I wrote some notes down here using this 7-step process. First thing we're going to look at is king safety. Okay, both kings are pretty safe. Material. Okay, if you've counted the material, you will notice that black is up a pawn here. So we're going to give black, edge with that, right? Black is up material. A pawn is a pawn, right? All the pieces are equal, but black is up a pawn. Are there any direct threats in the position? The answer is no, right? Each side, you can observe, you see where all the pieces are located, all the pawns, nothing is being threatened. Now we start getting to some real important things here. Open files. Are there any open files? Well, I see two right away, right? The E file and the C file are wide open, okay? Now, I'm looking at semi-open files. What I consider a semi-open file is a file that is occupied by just one pawn, all right? So it could either be a white pawn or a dark pawn, or a black pawn, but just one, okay? Pieces, I'm not counting, all right? So for semi-open files, I see the A file being semi-open, B file, and the D file. And the reason why is because the B file has one pawn on it, right? It's the pawn on B5. The A file has the pawn on A7, okay? And the D file has the pawn on D5, all right? After that, I move on to diagonals, all right? There's many open and semi-open diagonals. I'm not going to go through them all. You can observe that on your own, but for instance, you see the dark square bishop of black on the A1, H8 diagonal. The H1, A8 diagonal for the light square bishop is semi-open. Right? A2 to G8 diagonal, again, semi-open. So the point is that there's a lot of open and semi-open diagonals, and also open and semi-open files. What that should tell you is that this position is conducive to long-range pieces, such as bishops. As you can see, white has the bishop pair. Okay, long-range piece, the queens, of course, and the rook. So this position is great for the heavy and powerful pieces, as they have plenty of scope to move around, and that's something that you always want to keep in mind. Moving on in our analysis, we're looking at the pawn structure now. Okay, who has the better pawn structure? To me, it's negligible because each side, right, has isolated pawns. Black just happens to have an extra pawn. It's isolated also, but it's pretty much a wash with that. Okay, next thing we're going to look at is weak squares. Okay, what I consider a weak square is a square that cannot be occupied in your own territory. So for instance, white's territory on the board is from A1, okay, all the way up to A4, and all the way across to H4, and all the way to H1. So a rectangle from the first rank to the fourth rank. And then that's the same for black. So for instance, from A8 to A5, and from A5 to H5, and H5 to H8, that's black's rectangular territory. So weak squares for black would be squares that in his territory that he cannot occupy. So for example, the rook on A6 represents a weak square for black. That's in black's territory, but black cannot safely occupy that without being captured. Okay, so some weak squares for black would be C6, for example. Right, the knight, black's knight can't come to C6 safely. It will be captured by the pawn. Another weak square is F6. Bishop can't go to F6. The king can't occupy H6. So those are weak squares. Moving to the fifth rank, black's fifth rank. Again, A5 would be weak for black. Black cannot safely occupy that square. E5 is also weak for black, and so on. And those are what I consider weak squares. And conversely, they will be strong for white. As you can see, white has a beautiful rook on A6. All right. For black, strong squares for him, or and weak for white, would be, for instance, C4. Right. You can picture a knight being posted on C4, E4. Okay, because black can safely put a piece there, right, under the right circumstances, but white cannot, and that's white's territory. All right, those are danger signals that when an opponent is able to, set up shop in your territory, you can't do anything about it. All right, G4 would be under contest, although that's not good for white either, because that's white's territory once again. Next thing we're looking at is the center. All right, the center is pretty equal because black occupies D5 with this pawn, and he also controls E4 with this pawn. Again, white cannot occupy E4, which is in his own territory. Conversely, white is controlling or possessing the D4 square, having his knight there, beautiful blockading piece, I might add, and also has control over E5, as black cannot safely place his piece on E5. So those four squares in the center are evenly distributed. So the center is, just up for grabs. Each side has its piece of the center. Next thing we're looking at is space. White has more space. You can see white is occupying the first 5 ranks of the board, and 6 if we include the count the rook on A6. All right, so white definitely has more space here. That's an advantage for white. And finally, we're looking at development / piece location or mobility here. Development, the opening is far over. We're going into move 33. So everything is pretty much developed. But when we look at the piece location or mobility, we can see that that's something that sticks out in the position. White has better piece location, better piece coordination, if you will. The rook on A6 is beautifully placed on that semi-open A file. and it's also sitting on black's third rank. Okay, so that's an excellent position for the rook. White also has the two powerful bishops again on beautiful diagonals, and the knight is on a wonderful blockading square on d4. You really can't think of a better place to have that knight. Besides, say, like c6, for example, if you can get it there without being captured. So White's pieces are very well placed. Perhaps White's worst placed piece might be that bishop on f2, and that's still pretty well placed as it's backing up that knight on d4, right? And maybe you can improve the queen, of course, but overall, White has the better piece placement and coordination. What sticks out in the black position as far as the piece placement is that the rook is well placed on e8, and the bishop is well placed on g7, and the queen is all right, right? Maybe you can move the black queen to an open file or something like that. It's not too bad. What sticks out about the black piece placement is those knights. Those knights are terrible on the back rank. All right, they're short range pieces, and to be effective, they need to be moved up the board, right? So in black's case, down the board, right? And they're safest when supported by outposts. So for example, safe squares for black's knights would be e4 and c4, right on those anchor squares, because since the knights aren't long range pieces, they need to be protected. See, for instance, the bishops can sit back and attack from all the way across the board. The knights can't do that. So that means you have to get the knights close to be able to attack. However, when they're close, they're subject to be captured. Therefore, you need to protect them with pawns and have outposts. So this is why outposts are so important in the position. So in this case, black has outposts available on c4 and e4. Problem is getting them there. Okay, so with all that information, all right, we had some advantages for white, some for black. Do you remember what black's advantage was? Black's main advantage was the fact that he was up material, up a pawn. It's a static advantage, but nevertheless, a pawn is a pawn, and this is going to dictate the overall strategy for both sides. White's advantage is more dynamic in that he has better piece placement, better, these are like temporary advantages, because if black is given a chance to consolidate his pieces, move his pieces around, even trade off pieces, right, he can negate that advantage that white has. All right. However, white has some static advantages too. Again, having more space in the position, right? Nice static advantage. Okay, having a bishop here, again, it's a nice static advantage to have. So I would say that although black is up a pawn, that white has compensation, right, in the form of dynamism. So I would say that this position is equal. Now, the plans for both sides. White having these more dynamic advantages, better coordination, it's better for him to play a more active game. He is down a pawn, and while he is more coordinated than his opponent, it's better for him to strike first, while the opponent's army is more confused and not coordinated. As you can see, those knights being on the back rank like that. All right, black wants to try to slow things down, trade off if he can, consolidate, and if he can, get those knights off the back rank and onto those outposts. All right, these plans are going to dictate the rest of the game. All right, and this is how you have to break down your positions. When you and this is basically how you make plans in chess. Look at the features and kind of go from there. And of course, things have to be tactically sound at the end, but breaking the position down, I just gave an example, right? You can add any different type of features you want in the position, but breaking the position down and determining what the features are will kind of give you a little signpost as to where you should be going. All right, so enough of me running my mouth, right, and talking. Let's get into what happened. So here, Adorjan with the white pieces played the move Queen A2. All right, Queen A2. Why Queen A2? Queen A2, of course, attacks the D pawn as I have highlighted. Right. Remember, the D pawn is isolated. Isolated pawns must be protected by pieces. Not only does it threaten to win the isolated pawn on D5, it also puts pressure on the A7 pawn. This has the effect of restricting the black pieces, namely the black knight on C8. That knight can't move because if it moves, then the A7 pawn is going to fall. So this has the effect of keeping Larsen tied up. For instance, Larsen wants to get his pieces out. Remember, he wants those knights up the board. So this is why Adorjan played in that way. He's creating a threat, right? So he's keeping black tied down and putting pressure on the position. So what does Larsen do here? Larsen plays Queen C7. So he says, hey, take that pawn, right? I don't want to be tied down. I'm going to attack the F pawn, all right? So now he puts the burden on Adorjan. What are you going to do? Adorjan plays Queen D2, protecting the pawn. Now, he protects the pawn, but it's a little passive. Remember what I said about the the temporary advantages, right? That if black's given a chance, eventually he's going to get his knights off the back rank and consolidate the position. All right, and then it'll just be up a pawn. Okay. However, if Queen D5, for example, okay, because white has two choices. He can take with the bishop or the queen. If Queen D5, then Queen C1, Bishop F1, and then just Queen takes F4, and then with Queen takes G5. So with all these open files and semi-open files and diagonals, etc., each player has to be very careful. That was just an example. We'll go back again to some other options. So let's say if on Queen A2, once again, Queen C7 is in the game, Bishop D5, okay? Instead of the Queen, Bishop D5, and then Queen takes F4 from here. Now, let me just show you. If Queen C1 again, right, just like in the other variation, it's not as effective because with the bishop capturing on D5, it allows the king to go to a better square, which is the G2 square. So what happens is, sorry about that, I don't want to confuse you guys, right? Queen C1. So after Queen C1 check, the king goes up to G2 because now the G2 square has been vacated by the bishop. So now Queen takes F4, Knight F3. And you can see that with the queen, with the king on G2, he can do moves like Bishop G3 or even Knight H4 coming up. All right. So this gives, nice position for white, a nice dynamic position, again, open position to utilize that bishop pair. Okay, so that's the difference in that variation when white takes with the queen as opposed to taking with the bishop. So once again, if he took with the queen, then Queen C1, and notice in this position the king can't go up to G2 because the bishop is on G2. All right, and if the king goes to F1, then just Queen takes F4 with check. So Bishop F1, moving the bishop to a more passive square, a worse square, and then Queen takes F4. So can't you see why this position would be a little bit better for black's goals, right? Notice how the bishop on F1 looks very passive. So Queen takes Queen C7, Bishop D5, right? Again, opening the position up for the bishops. Queen takes F4, because I always say in my videos, if you have better development, better piece location, then start a fight with the opponent. Your pieces are better placed for the combat. All right, it makes sense. The logic is there. Okay, you want to get your opponent before he's ready. He's not really, so in this position, black is not really ready to fight. And of course, these are general principles. Everything has to be concrete at the end. All right, but this is just a variation to show you how how the fight could go if Adorjan took up the challenge and played bishop takes d5. So knight f3, because you can see right here that the knight is threatened, right? See, the black is counterattacking also. So knight f3. Now knight b6. See how the knight gets off the back rank, but at the cost of the pawn. So knight b6. I'm sorry, yeah, knight b6. Rook takes a7, and notice that the bishop is pinned. So it's give and take here. The black is getting his pieces back in the position, but white is getting compensation in as far as pinning the bishop on g7, getting his material back. Knight takes d7, knight takes d5, black gets the bishop here. Give and take. Queen takes d5, queen c1 check, and king h2, for example. And now the other knight comes off the schneid back there. b6, queen f1, challenging the bishop on f2, queen d2, and knight f4. And that threat, of course, is this queen to h3. All right, and this would probably force a draw now because rook takes g7. And black cannot take. This is all my analysis here. King h8. The reason why, the idea behind rook takes g7 is that if king g7, then it ends up in mate for white. So queen d7 check, king f8 to protect the rook. Then the bishop comes out c5, rook e7, and then it's going to end up mate shortly after. So king h8 has to be played. But black still has the threat on h3. So check, king g8, check again, kind of forcing the exchange, bishop b4, and now you pick up the knight, but black returns the exchange, and the game is most likely going to end in a draw. Queen endings are notoriously drawish, but I just wanted to take that time and go off on a little tangent to give you the idea of the complexity of play in these variations. So now we're going to go back, okay, because it's not easy for either side, and these are the type of positions Larsen would excel in. So queen a2, queen c7, right, was played, and remember, bishop d5 was probably the best. It probably was time for Adorjan to just go for and start this fight. He played queen d2, which is also sensible, because he figures, hey, I still have the static advantages of the two bishops, for instance, right? Better piece placement, right? So he's like, hey, I'll get the pawn will drop, all right? So Larsen takes this time now. Knight b6, knight's coming off the back. And now Adorjan plays bishop f3. In my opinion, a slow move. Okay, I see what he's trying to do. He's playing that consolidation game. He's playing the game that's, hey, I'm down a pawn, but all my pieces are better. However, Larsen is improving his pieces also. So what's going to happen when Larsen's pieces are just as good as yours, but he's up a pawn? Well, you just be down a pawn. So maybe another good idea for Adorjan is just to play the move knight c6. Okay, so attacking the a7 pawn twice. So this kind of forces the exchange here of the knights. So see what happens. Knight takes c6, b takes c6, h4. This is like kind of trappy. Bishop takes b6, a takes b6, queen f2, queen c6, rook takes b6, check, king h2. And this is going to also lead to drawish kind of position with these opposite color bishops. I'm not going to go into all the variations. Like, for instance, you're going to have to figure out on your own why the move queen takes c6 here is not the best move for white. All right, I'm sorry, for black. But just to give you just a little taste of other ideas that are possible for white. Instead, bishop f3, sensible looking move. And now, again, more consolidation by Larsen. Rook e7, guarding the 7th rank. All right, remember the variation I showed you before where the white rook ends up on the 7th rank and rook takes g7 and all that? Well, Larsen is seeing far ahead, and he's playing some good prophylactic moves. He's guarding the bishop, guarding the a7 pawn. All right, king g2, and now h4. So we just saw that in the last variation. So you guys are like, man, what's up with h4? Larsen is bugging. He's just like throwing away material. h4, this move is a trap here. And of course, Adorjan did not fall for it. He just played rook a2. Okay? The idea behind h4 is that if bishop takes h4, the bishop is distracted and the queen is left unprotected. And you'll see. So what happens is after bishop h4, the knight will drop into c4, attacking the queen. And you can see now that the queen has limited squares when it to go to and still be able to protect the pawn on f4. So that the only square that the queen can go to and still protect f4 is c1. The problem is if queen c1, knight e3, ouch, discovered check, and then the queen drops. So you can see that the bishop being on h4 is bad, because if it was on f2, you would just be able to snatch the knight off. So that's the idea behind that move of Larsen's. Okay. So rook a2 was played. Again, decent move, but if we ask ourselves the question, who has improved their pieces more throughout the last few moves, we have to give the nod to black, because black has gotten his knight off the back rank, right? He's brought the rook to the 7th rank, so he's kept white from really being able to undertake anything of meaning to use his advantages that we spoke about earlier of having this better piece placement, right? All we've seen for the last 3 moves from white, bishop f3, king g2, and rook a2, kind of moves that are kind of, solid, and they maintain the status quo. The problem is that white can't really afford to just maintain the status quo, because he's down a pawn, and black can use those moves to improve his position. So Larsen kept it moving. He played queen d6. All right. Now what he's doing is he's protecting the d pawn, right, and forcing it and preparing this move c4. Okay. Also possibly anticipating move like rook c2. Now, if he did c4 here, knight c4 here, I'm sorry, queen c1, notice that combination I showed you earlier doesn't work with knight e3. Why doesn't knight e3 work? Well, I had just explained it to you, because now the bishop is not distracted by the h4 pawn. So bishop just takes, and then black would just be lost. So little nuances there. So rook a2 happened, queen d6, and now Adorjan plays bishop e2. Notice how he's being sucked into like playing passively. Now the bishop's on a2. The bishop doesn't want to be on that diagonal. It's on a2. Again, trying to anticipate, knight c4. Larsen jumps in there anyway. Knight c4. And now queen c1 is played. So he's threatening that was threatening to take. It's a big decision right here, because if Adorjan takes, then he makes the black pawn even stronger by bringing it up a square to c4. All right, and he is going to have some type of issue with the knight being pinned to the queen. So for example, bishop takes c4, D takes c4. Then you have the idea of the rook coming to d7. All right. And so let's just show you. So for instance, example, if he plays knight f3 here, then queen takes d2, knight takes d2, c3. And you can see how that pawn becomes a menace. It's protected by the bishop on g7, and things aren't looking too good. He goes to c6, queen takes, rook takes, c3. Again, that pawn is a menace. This is why Adorjan didn't want nothing to do with that move. However, that's his best move. The reason why is because of this beautiful move that Larsen probably overlooked also, which is knight takes f5. What knight takes f5 does is it exploits the weak knight on d8, right? The knight still being on the back rank, right? The whole knight on the rim is dim scenario, right? So if the knight f5, queen takes d2, rook takes d2. Notice the rook is now attacking the knight on d8. So g takes, rook takes, and now the pawn wants to race down the board, but the rook is in perfect position to get behind the pawn. Now, remember that pawn push Larsen made earlier with h4? Now it backfires because now that pawn is weak. With the rook on c8 behind the pawn on c3, white has nothing to worry about and can freely capture that pawn. Let's say rook b7, bishop takes h4, rook b5, bishop e1, rook b2, and again the game is very drawish here. Black's not going to be able to queen. Of course, blunders take place, but black's not going to be able to queen with those three isolated pawn positions, three isolated pawns. Trust me on that. But white's not going to be able to win this either. So bishop takes c4 was definitely Adorjan's best bet, but it's easy to see why he didn't do that. Knight f5 it's kind of hard to spot that one. Okay? And especially if you've been looking at the isolated pawn on d5 as a target that you could possibly win, just to give up on it and switch plans, that's really hard to do in chess, is to give up on a idea and then switch to a new idea. So, for instance, giving up on the idea of building up against the isolated pawn and then winning it, all of a sudden you have this new idea, well, okay, I'm going to let him get this passer down the c-file, but I'm going to get my rook behind it and stop it and all that. Hard to switch gears on that. So Adorjan played queen c1, all right? And now Larsen made a fantastic move, is that he removes this important blockader from d4. He gives up his very strong bishop on g7 for the very strong knight on d4, which opens up everything. Bishop takes d4, bishop takes d4, and now knight e6, right? And they're taking over the initiative, and the knights are glorious now in the position. Knight challenging d4 and hitting f4 at the same time. Something's got to give. Adorjan plays bishop f6. Now he could have tried bishop takes c4, d takes c4, and then say bishop e5 to try to protect. However, Adorjan will fall to queen d5 check. Now, again, if we go back to analysis, right, and redo the analysis, king safety would be a problem for white here. All right, king g1, and now powerful move, knight takes g5, exploiting that complex with the pawns on g5, f4, and the bishop, kind of being like a glorified pawn there. Those are always dangerous situations like that, when the bishop is being anchored like that, supported by an outpost. Knight takes g5, queen a3, hitting the rook on e7, rook d7, queen e3, and then queen d1. And that's, again, it's just an example, but black is winning here. All right. If you have any questions, just get in the comment box below. Like I said, I'm not giving every single variation because my analysis go very deep on these games. My videos run long as it is. I try to, make sure every tactic is understood, but sometimes people get in the comments and say like, "Oh, what about this?" Like, as if like I didn't look at that something real obvious. But any comment is great. Like we could go through it. But trust me, Dorian would be lost in that scenario if he played Bishop takes C4 and tried to preserve this pawn on F4. So what he did is he tried to fight back. He hit the rook on E7, the Bishop F6. Larsen came in. Those horses came in running wild, came in bucking like Knight F4 check, King F3. Knight D3 and Adorjan resign. You know what? I was gonna put the variation up, but I'll leave that to the viewers to figure out why Adorjan resigned. Like you can see the arrows, of course. Queen G3 is threatened, but again, just check it out for yourselves, and maybe set the position up and have a little fun with it. But Dorian resigned, and this was just a fantastic game. Like I like how those knights were just sitting on C8 and D8, and they just come and become the heroes of the game. Just brilliant play from Larsen. A lot of piece activity, open files, diagonals everywhere. This is one of those games that a lot of people wouldn't know about, right? It's Larsen, it's Adorjan, 1977. Like who cares? But this game right here, just fantastic game. I only showed you the end part of it, right? From move 33 or so, but it's very fantastic game, and it just gives you some insight on the you know the style of play of Larsen. He has that style where he likes those kind of murky positions, like a Moravzevich or a Tal, where very slithery player, hard to pin down, very dynamic, takes a lot of chances, and you can even see with a game like this why he lost to Fischer in their match, because Fischer's like more solid, more calculated, where Larsen is going to take chances in the opening. Larsen is going to play openings less than optimal. He's just so he could get the positions he likes or better chances. So players like that are going to have brilliancies, and then they're going to just get smoked. Brilliancies and get smoked. But when they're on, they're really on. In this game right here, Larsen just showed his class, and you can even see in the tournament he came in second place. He only lost 2 games in the tournament. He didn't lose to Karpov. He actually drew to Karpov. He lost to Tal and I forgot who. He lost to I want to say one of the Spanish grandmasters. But fantastic game. I hope you guys enjoyed that video. Once again, please hit that thumbs up button. Get in those comments down below. Remember, I'm on Lead Chess, so if you want to play, let's play. I'm playing minute games, 30-second games, 10-minute games, whatever. I'm also on chess.com, so come see me there. Also, check the links below. It's DVDs or videos, and books related to the opening on the board. So some good chess related material, and also please consider supporting my channel via donation. It's greatly appreciated. And guys, I'll see you guys on the next video, and be safe out there in this storm. You guys on the East Coast, and going through it right now. So like I said, I hope this is provide a little escapism / comfort, and I hope you learning something from these videos. All right, guys, I'll see you guys on the next video.